washed them on Saturday.
Why is so hard?
He didn't know. He didn't know what was going on. Me and him were supposed to go on Saturday, but because they were telling me, I was like, you know what, I'm going to do it by myself. And then I surprised him when we got home. And I was like, hey, that's not mine.
What does it show now? Nothing.
Did you cover it up?
Yes.
Oh.
And
Picture.
then I put it in dry cleaning. He was like confused. Because he was like, who is that? And then I was like,
You have a good Resurrection Day?
so funny.
Yeah.
And I actually had to
Died so you could be here today.
I had a card in the mail the other day. So I had no driver's license now.
Oh, you wrote official?
Well, it's not the card. They send that little paper
Hey, Melanie?
that you hold with your card until it expires.
See, mine expired probably.
This
Yeah,
actually
but
works
since I
pretty
lost my
good.
license and I had to go get a new one, it's not going to expire in 2 years. So I have to still keep that one for later.
You lost your license.
Yes, I lost it because they're not old enough, and I forgot to get registered with them. And they didn't give me my license back, and then I went to the store to get it in the mail. And then they didn't give it back, and I went back and asked them about it, and they didn't know what I was. So I get paid $20 and go all the way.
Okay, so we,
Or,
y'all printed off the review that we sent you. Back for Carrie. Remember the hearts on here, right? I think we have the heart tutorial on the glass shell here.
I did all the answers.
And here,
You're like, is that?
no way.
Is this yours?
Had a woman down in Texas would come to class really nice looking every day except the exams. She'd come all scruffy during the exams, and I figured it was just because she was studying all night or something like. But she had the answers written up in the bill of her cab, and she would just. Doesn't matter today, but she would look up there. I've had them write them on their breast and on their legs. And
What?
yeah.
How do people think of that?
How do people think of it? Okay, so what's that blood vessel there?
That's pretty creative.
It is, yeah.
Thank you for the good idea.
That's the superior vena cava. Do you remember the two blood vessels that come together to form that?
Are we calling this number one?
I was going to have to
The right and left brachiocephalic veins, that's correct. And this vessel down here then?
inferior.
So that one's draining the head, the thorax, the arm. This one drains the rest of the body, everything below the diaphragm. Right? Okay. And then the blue ones here. Notice I say blue ones to try to trick you. So those aren't veins, those are pulmonary arteries. It's just they're blue because they have a different level of oxygen, a low level of oxygen. And so they're coming off this vessel, which is what? Pulmonary trunk. And the red ones are pulmonary veins. Now, those look kind of bizarre, but they run behind the heart and enter the atrium over this side. That chamber is the
Right atrium.
This is on blackboard, guys. Why, you're recording it.
Oh, it is?
Yes.
Smile for us.
It is, right? Okay, I thought so.
We just want to
What's the other name for this valve? Anyone remember?
It's leaf.
That's labeled tricuspid. What's the other name for it? Because the doctors never remember these. they'll say RAV or LAV. Right atrioventricular valve. Did you learn that somewhere? Atrio, between the atrium and the ventricle, atrioventricular valve. What chamber is this?
Right.
How many chambers does the heart have?
4.
Okay. How many does a turtle have?
I don't need to know. 3. 2. 4.
It has 3, actually 4, but it's they counted as 3 because the ventricles aren't complete. Except and a snake would have, bird would have 4. Okay, what's this? What's that blood vessel again?
Trunk. Good job.
Okay, what's this thing?
That's the ligaments and arteries.
That's correct. That's the remnants of the arteriosus that allowed blood to go around the lungs in the fetus. You learned that today? And this valve is pulmonary, pulmonic valve, it's sometimes called, or the similar valve, pulmonary. That valve then is, and we talked about how these work, or we talked about how they work, the valves work.
Pressure to the.
They work because pressure on one side is higher than the other, and that pushes them open. What closes them? Pressure is on this side is higher than this side, so it pushes it closed when the blood tries to re-enter the ventricles. What opens these valves? Pressure. What closes those valves? Pressure. So the valves direct blood flow through the heart. One should be a one-directional flow, right? And the heart generates blood pressure because of that. This chamber is the left atrium. That valve is the, and the 2 other names for it are left atrioventricular and the mitral. Remember why it's called mitral valve? Have you ever seen the hat the Catholic bishops wear? That's called a mitre, and it's shaped like that hat.
Really?
With the two flaps, yeah. Okay, so what are those stringy things? Okay. And these muscles here, and what are their purpose, remember?
They pull down the
They take up the slack. Right before the ventricles contract, they contract. Take up the slack on the chordae tendineae. Because you can't have a whole gigantic amount of pressure hitting those valves at once without, if there's slack in those, there might be a retroversion of the valve. And what's the retroversion on the left side called?
Left ventricular hyperplasia.
Heart murmur?
Oh, what was your question?
And I said, when that valve is loose and flaps back up into that ventricle, you hear it as a murmur. This chamber over here, okay, that blood vessel,
That's the descending aorta.
the aorta, spina,
That is the
it's a septum between those. And that should be complete at birth. This opening here might still be present. What opening was that?
I got that picture.
Oh, you got it?
That's the same one we had like 3 weeks ago.
You still have it?
Okay, estimate this hematocrit then. Plus or minus 3. What is it? Okay, there's the bottom 0 mark. There's, okay. 48, 50, something like that.
What would the units be? Or do you just leave it?
It's a percentage.
Percentage?
It's a percentage.
It's 8%.
So it's 50% of the packed cell, or of the blood is. What could be a problem with this?
It's female.
We'll look really after it.
It's high for a male too, so what could be the problem with it?
That's where the blood cell.
Yes, but that's not the problem. Yes, it's too high.
Dehydrated, yeah. The dehydrated.
What happens to the blood viscosity with a high hematocrit? Yeah, the high, and what does that do to the blood pressure? Yeah,
Taking aspirin.
taking aspirin, yeah, that'll be in your blood. Did you talk about blood pressure and lecture?
What are the two characteristics of blood pressure? What are the two major factors that determine your blood pressure?
Systolic over diastolic.
Cardiac output and what else? The total peripheral resistance. What are the two influences on resistance? Resistance to the hematocrit, blood viscosity.
I don't think we went over this part.
No.
You should have.
Yeah. No, this looks familiar.
What determines cardiac output?
Pressure.
Heart rate.
Heart rate. This should be around 5,000 per minute. There's the minute, 5,000 cc.
Pressure.
Stroke volume, does that sound familiar?
We never did this.
Stroke volume.
Did you talk about afterload and inotropy and? Okay. We do things differently.
I'm trying to prep you for medical and nursing.
All right, I'll take a picture of that.
Okay, there's a whole lot more to that. So one of the factors in blood pressure is the viscosity of the blood, and that's why they do this kind of thing. I won't use this one on the test, but 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, yeah, so that one looks like 50 also. Nice fingernails on it. Male or female? There it is, right about there. We've got a lot of hemolysis there. 10, 20, 30,
24.
23. What's wrong with that?
Really
No.
What could cause that?
Low iron and low anemia.
Some type of anemia, yeah, sure. I'll use better pictures than that. Well, pictures more like this. What's that one?
30.
What's wrong with that? Once again, it's too low. Look at how much plasma there is. 70% of that's plasma, so that's the type of anemia. So if you do a blood count and you find that, well, this person has 5 million red blood cells per cubic millimeter of blood. But when you do this, and it shows that, what should you be thinking about? Yeah, they have the right number of cells, but those cells are not very full of hemoglobin, or those cells are smaller than normal. And so, as we're going to see in the questions that we talk about later, just doing one test, like the blood count, red cell count, or the hematocrit, doesn't tell you the full picture most of the time.
Dr. Steve,
But
in our lecture, we got a different range for normality, hematocrit for male and female that you gave out. Did you go over that normal range that you're expecting
Yeah, we're getting there.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. But that range, that's Mr. Montgomery's. What did she say? What did your instructor say?
I don't have hers out. It's
The second page of, the third page of this handout. We've got a female range of 38 to 42 or so,
38, 42.
and a male range 40 to 45.
So for the person that had 50%, what would you say about them?
They had some kind of polycythemia. They could have an iron overload disease. And one of the things with iron overload is that you make red blood cells to try to remove the iron from remove the iron from the liver. Because too much iron will damage your liver, too much iron will damage your pancreas, too much iron will damage your heart. It's the most common genetic disease, but it's hardly ever tested for. Okay, so what did this go by itself?
I think so. Looks like it's on time.
Cool.
So that's going to be a blood spot.
You're supposed to estimate the amount, a percentage of hemoglobin. Do we do it again?
90%.
No, I've seen it 4 times. Fly across the screen.
Gotta give it a good job. And I don't make your day, what was it, that you made my day? What was it again?
90.
Okay, yeah, somewhere between, it's certainly not that, right? Somewhere between that. 90%. Okay, now estimate the number of grams of hemoglobin in this drop.
Mm-hmm. 14.1.
Okay, and so once again, somewhere between that. And that's grams of hemoglobin per 100 cc's of blood. So if you donate blood, this is what they do. They have a special machine. Actually used to do sedimentation rate in copper sulfate solution. This must be on a timer. Did you study these in lecture?
Remember this from micro?
Dr. O just told me you went through these in lecture.
Descriptive, not picture.
Okay.
Right.
So you'll learn these before the exam?
Yes.
This is a basophil and that's an eosinophil. Basophils stain dark blue granules. Eosinophils have dark, orange granules in them.
Are there on that?
Eosinophil. So there's not very many of these in your blood, not very many of these in your blood. Eosinophil.
Okay.
So this one, the basophil picks up the basic part of the stain, which is bluish. The eosinophil picks up the eosin, which is a stain that's used. So they're you stain them with that mixture of those two dyes.
Are they all granular?
Yeah, both of those are granulocytes, yeah. Do you remember monkey blood?
No.
What? Your mom ever put monkey blood on your wound?
Oh, I don't.
No, it was a mercurochrome, and it had eosin in it, so you could see where you were putting it.
Little last thing.
So yeah, it would sting, but it would be cooler to run outside and show the other kids that you had monkey blood put on your scratch rather than just mercurochrome. My mom used to call it monkey blood. Look it up. This is when mothers really love their kids.
Right. I think it's give them a MacBook and let them go.
Yeah, just give them one of these MacBook things, or what is that, tablets, and let them go.
I paid for this.
So these are the two you just saw, eosinophil and basophil, picking up the orange part of the stain and the purple part. The kind of cells that are mostly nucleus are the lymphocytes. So those are the cells producing antibodies for you. And they're the B cells and T cells, which you've probably heard of. The biggest one of all of them, it's probably maybe 3 times the size of a red blood cell, is a monocyte. They usually have this horseshoe-shaped nucleus like that, or a big round. But in comparison to the red blood cells around it, it's maybe twice to 3 times as big. What's the disease when you have too many of those? Mononucleosis. And this is what they call a polymorphonuclear cell because it has a many-formed nucleus. That's a neutrophil. Polymorphonuclear cell.
And 41 is a neutrophil, you said?
It's a neutrophil. Yeah. Sometimes they look like strings of hot dogs. Sometimes eosinophils. Both of these are usually going to just have 2 lobes. Let's see those like there. So those are the 3 granulocytes. It's neutral to the stain, picks up the basic part of the stain, basophil, picks up the eosin part of the stain, the eosinophil.
What's the one that kind of looks like a kidney bean?
Number 42.
Is that? Yeah, I remember in my
Horseshoe?
grad sheet.
That's the
Monocyte.
Monocyte, yeah. Big.
It's a monocyte.
So there are pictures in your textbook too that you can look at there. Okay, so you have blood vessels on the heart. So tell me what's number 1. So what's number 1 again?
Pulmonary vein.
Pulmonary vein.
Right pulmonary
In here,
vein.
one on the right side. Right?
2 is the artery. 1 is the
Right
It's
pulmonary
a
vein.
right superior pulmonary vein.
That's what number 2 is.
That's what number 1 is. Number 2 is an artery.
Just so you know.
2 is an artery. 1 is a vein. I know they're different colors, but that's what the pulmonary is all about.
I would have printed it out.
So number 2 is the superior right pulmonary artery.
So one is right inferior.
So that's an inferior there.
Oh, so they're both superior. Oh, I understand.
See how this one splits here? So superior, inferior.
1 is a vein, 2 is an artery, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Why did they color them red and blue?
Oxygen.
Oxygen level. What's an artery?
Away from the
Away from the heart.
And a vein.
to the heart.
So these are bringing blood back to the heart. Those are taking blood away from the heart. Okay. Number 3 is a brachiocephalic artery. There's only 1. Number 4 is a
Common carotid.
which one?
It's the left, the right column.
Right.
The left.
The left common carotid,
Oh.
because the brachiocephalic splits.
Brachiocephalic goes down, that's right.
And 5 is a left
So that's
Subclavian.
artery. So you're always going to write artery or vein. Big A, big B.
What
Right
was
to
three
left.
again?
It was left superior artery.
Sometimes call it the brachiocephalic trunk. Number 1 is the
Inferior vena cava.
2 2, once again, is a
Superior pulmonary vein. What
on
that
the right
is.
side.
On the right, yes,
The
right.
left is a superior pulmonary artery.
What are we doing?
Number 3, what's number 4? The right brachiocephalic vein, and then 5 is the left one. We're going to cover most of these blood vessels on your list here today.
Oh, hold on. I'm sorry. Hold on. B-R-A-C-H-O. Man, you're good.
You have to recognize this as a posterior view. Number 1 then is a left superior pulmonary vein. Number 2 is a left, probably superior pulmonary artery. Number 3 is the left brachiocephalic, and 4 is the right brachiocephalic. Okay, we're going okay so far. Yep.
Has to be.
So what's 1 again?
Superior
Pulmonary vein.
It's a vein, although it's red. Remember the distinction.
What was the... I can't keep up. I'm trying. You can go over this
Okay, number 1 then is the, which one? Left subclavian artery. Number 2 is the left common carotid artery. Number 3 then is the brachiocephalic trunk or brachiocephalic artery. You know all these? I hope. What's this one here?
That is sinus.
Great.
No.
Greater cardiac vein.
Right coronary artery. What's this one? The left coronary artery. Supplying the heart with blood. What's this one here?
Oh, just on that one.
Sinus.
Coronary sinus drains the blood back to the right atrium. Number 1. Well, if we don't put that on your exam,
Brachiocephalic.
right brachiocephalic vein, which makes number 2. See, 2 and 3 come together to form the brachiocephalic, so 2 must be a subclavian on the right side, the right subclavian vein. 3 would be the right internal jugular vein, because there is an external. Number 4 would be the left internal jugular vein. Number 5, left subclavian vein. Number 6, left brachiocephalic vein.
What are the 2 little ones in between 3 and 4 that are going on?
One's probably the vertebral vein. They're so variable. Veins, the smaller ones are variable. There may be 1 there, there may be 2. They may be missing on the other side, or they might come off the subclavian. arteries are pretty standard of where they are.
It's brachial
Okay.
Oh, I thought it said, of course, this.
Right internal.
One is? Oh, okay.
Number one. Yeah, it's just gone under the clavicle. So it's a left subclavian artery. Number two, in the axillary region, would be the, and then three in the brachial region would be the, okay. Except I won't be stating it that way. Axillary. Axillary. So we don't say armpit, we say axillary region.
Right, that makes sense.
Okay, so you probably know the name of that trunk, but what's right below it?
Is that gastric?
The superior mesenteric artery. Okay. And then this one, number 5, artery. Okay. And then in contrast to number 4, this one down here, inferior mesenteric artery. Okay, we don't know what sex this person is, but there's a couple vessels here. What are those two? If there was a penis here, they would be the testiculars. If there was ovaries there, they'd be the ovarians. Okay. Number 1 would be the aorta, abdominal aorta. 2, the aorta now splits down in that region.
Well, the 3 is left. Oh, okay, common full split, yes, okay.
So that's the common iliac on this side, left upside. What are these two? Okay, and then this would be a external iliac. Then it passes under the inguinal ligament and becomes the
Femoral. That's the other part I know.
okay, the left femoral artery.
What was number 2 and 3 again?
Common iliac and the external iliac.
You said left and right is external iliac.
Yes, because there is a right and left, isn't there?
Can you say that?
What?
Abdominal aorta?
Yeah.
Okay, that's all right.
What is it up here then?
Aorta.
Thoracic aorta. So that's being specific. That's good.
So if you were to make specifics, you just say
Yeah, just say aorta until it splits. Now what's this one that after it goes under the clavicle?
Subclavian on the right.
Okay, number 2 then.
Right subclavian artery.
right auxiliary.
Axillary.
Low, that's 2.
Axillary. Auxiliary, is that what you're saying? Axillary. 3,
Brachial on the right.
right side. And then 4 as it runs over the top of the radius.
Right, radial.
Right.
5 runs over the top of the ulnar. Okay.
And what's that loop one, Palmer?
The palmar arch, there's a superficial and a deep palmar arch.
So number 5.
And then each one of these little blood vessels also has a name.
Phalanges. Let's not get into that.
Polycus, polycus that.
This looks crazy.
Start with number 4. What's number 4?
Is it your right thumb or right?
The right common carotid.
Number 4 is right common carotid.
Number 3 as it goes through the vertebrae.
Vertebral.
Okay.
I'm a genius.
Here's the carotid, now is split into 2 pieces. One goes up into the brain.
Left internal.
One stays on the outside of the face.
So this is the right side?
External and internal.
There is no right side.
And there's no left or right?
Sure, it's the right side of the body. That's the brachiocephalic. Now, where's the left?
On the other side of the body?
This is the right side of the
But
body.
they're not like right legs, arteries.
Yes, they're right.
Exterior and
It's a right common carotid, so it's a right internal and a right external carotid. Artery.
I know these ones aren't on the test, but these are what make me work.
Yeah, it's going up into the skull, into the brain.
Right internal.
Remember the canal inside the skull that you learned in place? Right. Carotid canal.
What is it?
Start with number 3. What's number 3? Celiac trunk. Number 2 goes over to the liver, so that must be the hepatic artery. Number 5 goes to the spleen, so that must be the. Okay. This one comes off underneath the celiac trunk, so that's the superior mesenteric. That one's going to the stomach, so that must be a. Yeah, or gastric, just say gastric.
Which was that one? 4.
But you're correct, there's another gastric over here. So what are the 3 branches off the celiac trunk? Gastric, splenic, and hepatic. Yeah, just say gastric. Okay. What's this one again?
The thoracic.
Superior mesenteric artery. This one down here then is the. So there's the superior, there's the inferior. These pictures are on blackboard for you to work with. Yes, arteries and veins circle.
So the inferior is attached to, what is that? The large intestine, right?
Yes, as you see, the left side of the large intestine.
Okay.
But the superior
Is, right, okay.
supplies most of the small intestine and the ascending.
Got it.
So that's on your flow diagram that you're going to be doing. Be sure you keep track of that. Number 2 is the oral. What's number 1 then? The deep femoral?
Deep female.
Okay. What's number 3?
Anterior tibial artery.
What's number 5? Okay. Right or left?
Hold on. Number 5 is just turned around. Like it's the same leg, it's just turned around, isn't it?
Yeah, you know, here's the patella. There's no patella.
Yeah, it's left.
So
And the
it's,
condyles.
There you see in the sacrum. See the sacrum from the
yeah,
other.
so it's the right. Yeah.
These are both right legs. They're just moving.
It's gonna be the left.
What? There's no. Do you see a patella here?
Humanly possible.
No.
No, sir.
So it's the back of the leg.
So the
Back to what leg?
The back of the right leg.
What?
That's correct.
To the condyles.
So what's that?
You have to
The right popliteal artery.
No. 3 is anterior tibial, 5 is posterior.
The right.
The anterior
Yes.
anterior is front.
And so this is the fibular over here.
Yes.
old one.
What's number one?
Right.
Right, so.
Right subclavian vein.
Right.
Number two,
Vertebral.
as it goes through the vertebrae. Right vertebral vein. Number three,
Is that vertebral vein going through the foramen? So, would there really be a right or left at that point, or is there another one on the other side running along parallel?
yeah, how many holes does the cervical vertebrae have? Three. And then the central,
Those two.
where the spinal cord is, and then the two side vertebral foramina.
Smaller. That makes sense. Thank you.
So number three is,
Number three.
Ooh, it's hard to see.
That's the internal, so this is the
External?
external jugular.
That's confusing.
so number four is coming out of the skull.
So that's, oh, okay, so whatever comes out of magnum is the inferior.
So that would be the internal jugular. That's how you drain, the venous drainage of the brain.
Okay, magnum.
Call it internal because it's going to the internal part of the body.
It's similar to the internal and external carotids,
But it's described internal because of where it's going, feeding or comes from.
because it's coming from the inside of the skull.
Okay.
Although part of it comes off the face too.
And also with the cervical vertebrae, the two holes on each side, each hole have one vein, one artery.
Yeah.
There's vertebral artery, vertebral vein on each side.
Running. So there's rights and lefts arteries, and there's rights and left veins. Number one now is the, that's number two. So
Oh,
that's
sorry,
number
number
one.
one is brachial.
The right.
Oh, no.
It comes off first, near the head of the humerus is how I remember it. That's the phallic vein. And the other one is the basilic.
The what?
Basilic.
Basilic?
Yeah, the brachial veins deeper. These are superficial veins.
Cephalic and basilic.
Cephalic comes off near the head of the humerus. And then what's left over is the basilic. They here are form the vein that you take blood out of, the median cubital vein. You see these veins come together, they gather and collect together, and then they split apart. These are highly variable.
Can you go to the one more time? 1, 2,
Okay, number one is the cephalic vein on the right side. Number two is the subclavian vein on the right side. Number three is the basilic. So they were all on that 4-page diagrams I gave you.
We'll go over it right now.
Okay, this one is deeper, running next to the bone, so that's probably running along with the artery. They run together. There's the brachial vein. Highly variable once again. Maybe 3 pieces, 2 pieces, 1 piece.
Running is the brachial artery.
Number one, draining one of the kidneys, right renal.
One is right renal.
Right renal, and there is, since there's no blood vessels entering inferior vena cava, it just goes right to the right atrium. You have to be able to drain the blood from the thoracic wall, and that's done through what's called the azygos vein. Look where and there's a hemiazygos too, but look where the azygos dumps into the superior vena cava right there. still returning blood to the heart from the thoracic wall. So you're supplying it with blood through arteries, you gotta drain it too. What's number 3?
Common,
Right.
the left, common, ilia.
Okay, good. Remember all those. That's its complete name.
We can do it groups.
And then here it's just about to enter the body cavity.
It's the left femoral.
So there's the femoral vein, right, on the left side. You want okay, Barry? They made the superficial veins a little brighter in color, but the deeper veins are, well, real light in color. So that would be the femoral vein on the right side, which is a continuation here. So looking at it posteriorly, that's the femoral vein once again. What's number 4? Popliteal veins. Then number 3 is a superficial blood vessel. The greater saphenous or saphenous, some people call it. The one they strip out for bypass surgeries to use the blood vessel. Or they used to, I don't know if they do it anymore. Number 2 is the same as number 1.
It's your right. So
You're just seeing it in a different view there.
I'll explain it.
So what is this really bright
wait,
color
it's just a
vein
light.
on the first side?
This is
Right next to the femoral.
the greater saphenous.
Oh, that is the
And
greatest.
there's a deep femoral up here. That's why they're showing it on this over here, but they also show it over here. You can see that on some of the bodybuilders where they have very little body fat.
Yes.
They will be bulging out. We okay, so? Move forward, Terry? Okay, good. Number 1. You know the artery names, so you should know these two.
Superior, mesenteric.
Okay. And number 2,
Hepatic.
Hepatic vein, right?
there may be 3 or 4 of them, but in this case, it would be a right hepatic vein. Number 3 is the
Inferior.
4 is the
Hepatic portal vein.
hepatic portal vein. And that makes 5 the inferior mesenteric vein.
Oh, that's right.
So it's a continuation of this one here. There's the splenic vein right there.
Superior is going up.
Well, look, no, it's draining the same side as the artery supply. This is draining the same side as the artery supply. The inferior mesenteric supplied this side, the artery. The superior mesenteric supplied that side.
That's right, we're in the liver. Number 3 is inferior.
So this is that separate system, drainage system called the portal system. Got it? I'm running out of time here. And then part of this was the fetal. You did this in lecture today?
Yeah, this
Fetal
one we did.
circulation.
I haven't done
Fetal
this.
one.
So in the fetus, then what's a vein again? Carrying blood towards the heart. So here's the placenta, the blood, the oxygenated blood you're getting from mom, passes through the liver, kind of bypasses the liver through the ductus venosus to get right to the heart. These are the veins. You still have remnants of all of these inside your body. the vein and this, well, these two, no, I'm sorry, right here, these umbilical arteries, you still have remnants of those. So they're carrying blood away from the heart, your heart as a fetus, to the placenta. So those are arteries. Just keep in mind what the arteries and veins are doing. And then the two shunts around the lungs, what were they?
What, can you show us where they are?
Shunt, you have to shunt blood around the lungs because the lungs aren't doing anything. You're actually practicing breathing amniotic fluid. So one of the shunts is right here.
Yeah.
So that bypass helps you bypass the lungs. Some blood does go to the lungs.
And that's what it's really.
And the other shunt is right here, the foramen ovale. So you shunt blood right from this ventricle over to the other side, because that's pumping to the body, that's pumping to the lungs. So two ways to shunt blood around the lungs, which you probably learned in lecture today. Kind of a way to bypass the liver and all what it does, because your liver as a fetus is not doing that much for you yet. Maybe making some blood cells. And then we had on the last page, I just kind of duplicated what Mr. Montgomery wrote years ago about the blood and everything. So we talked about hemoglobin, we talked about hematocrit, the importance. What are the two types of anemias that you might encounter? Two general categories, actually three. General categories of anemia are those that involve not enough red blood cells or the lack of hemoglobin. Or the third one is faulty red blood cells, they're not working, which would be like sickle cell. Okay, so you have iron deficiency anemia, that's the lack of the proper amount of hemoglobin. How about a hemorrhagic anemia? What would that be?
You're bleeding.
Yes, not enough red blood cells. So he didn't put all three categories, but the reduction in the number of red cells or red cell abnormalities. And the two tests that can help determine that are the hematocrit and hemoglobin levels, which we did in lab. So the questions, the only really questions that were in the this group of pages that we went through for this exam are how do the hematocrit and hemoglobin. Oh, well, we didn't do that. Why is a single test often not sufficient to completely diagnose a suspected anemia? If you do a red cell count, you might see the proper number of red cell counts. But the hemoglobin concentration of each of those cells is not very good. So you can't just do a hematocrit and say, oh, they don't have anemia. You have to do both of them, hematocrit and hemoglobin, to get some sense of whether there's an anemia. Why do persons with almost any type of anemia tend to show the general symptoms that are the same? Yeah, it's the lack of oxygen carrying capacity in those cells. Either in the cells that are not too many cells or the cells that don't have enough hemoglobin. So the iron or the oxygen carrying capacity is low in both, in any one of those three types. Okay, so you're able to do or define these
but 5 types of anemia, and whether they involve a lower red blood cell number or damage to structure or lack of hemoglobin concentration. Sure, why not? Did you do them already?
No.
Not, I don't recognize that.
Yeah, there's some
That
that.
was-
Okay. Give a second one.
Let me see if I have the actual definitions that I've done in the past.
Plastic's the bone. Pernicious?
Can I take a picture of it to you, sir?
Pernicious anemia is from what? The lack of vitamin
D.
D.
Well,
There you go. So the intrinsic factors, or those intrinsic factors are not there to help you with that. So what, that would be an anemia where you're not making enough cells or not making enough hemoglobin. That would be a hemoglobin problem, right?
Which one is that?
No, that was pernicious.
I thought that was B12.
The plastic would be
bone marrow.
a bone marrow problem. You can get that from radiation therapy, for instance. So if it's in the bone marrow, then it's a problem with the,
Not enough red blood.
the number of red blood cells. Thalassemia, what was that again? So it's a problem with hemoglobin levels once again.
Yeah. What's it caused by?
It's a genetic thing. Usually you see it in, I thought, Mediterranean population. Is it on your internet there? Sickle cell, that would be the problem with the,
That's damage.
Bones.
So
the structure of the red blood cell problem.
This is genetic too, right?
Who?
This is genetic. Sickle cell.
Yeah, that would be a genetic thing. And then iron deficiency would be,
Iron
you
deficiency.
don't have enough iron in your blood, so you're having a problem with hemoglobin concentration, right? Now, sickle cell is also a problem with the hemoglobin structure because the hemoglobin's not as flexible as it should be. So iron deficiency, you're not making enough hemoglobin. You might have the proper number of cells, which might give you a right hematocrit. But if you look at the hemoglobin itself, it's not nice and red. It might even be orange, some of these anemias. The erythrocyte sedimentation rate, kind of an old thing. I don't think it's still done, but it's done by machine. It looks at the
Red blood cells.
it looks at red blood cells and how fast they sediment over the course of an hour. Or actually, they make the measurement at the end of an hour. It's the millimeters of plasma at the top of a blood tube after 1 hour. So it's not like our hematocrit. Although if we let the
I guess the blood sit in the hematocrit tube and not spin it, it would sediment over time. So it detects things like inflammation and autoimmune diseases like rheumatoid arthritis, infections, because those, the time will go up with those kinds of problems, infections.
The millimeters of plasma will go up with those types of infections? Or go down as the sediment increases?
It would take longer to sediment.
Sediment.
Yeah.
It'll take longer.
So the amount would be less, yeah. So they do it,
If it detects inflammation, autoimmune problems, and infections, indicated by long periods of substitution.
supposedly it should be something like less than or equal to your age, plus if you're female, you have to add 10. Divided by 2.
Autoimmune problems.
So what should your rate be?
Well, if I'm a male.
That's right.
Okay, so 48, 58.
No, you don't, if you're, you wouldn't add the 10.
Okay, 48 divided by 220.
So it should be less than or equal to 24 at your age. So if you look at the sediment, so this should be less than or equal to 24 millimeters after an hour. All of this would be red blood cells. I don't know how often it's used anymore, and Mr. Montgomery has let it into it. Questions about the exam?
Why does it, well, it's more about the ESR, why, if there's inflammation, why does it sediment slower?
The proteins in the blood that might be extra extra antibodies.
Okay.
The thing being produced during infection.
More viscous.
Yeah, we make it a little more viscous, right? Gonna turn your camera off.
Yep.